It's one of those things that I particularly feel really strongly that when money comes in for a particular cause, it needs to go to that cause. So if somebody gives money for water, money goes to water. If somebody gives money for medical, it goes to medical. Money for medical doesn't go to water. So for the doctor support, our original commitment was for a year, but at the same point in time, there's monies that came in for that purpose that would last us beyond a year. So we're feeling that God is calling us to that support of that doctor as long as the funding is there, and to support that clinic that is located in the village of Lava Lane. As I mentioned, we would have previously referred to that as the Tree of Life Clinic or the Tree of Life Doctor. You'll have to excuse my is it Creole that they speak in English? My Creole pronunciation, but the word Tree of Life was derived from the Creole word Mevavi, which I think in English translation means Tree of Life. And down in Lava Lane, the community association would refer to themselves as Mevavi. And because it was the community that invited us to support this doctor, we just decided to call it Tree of Life. And since then, actually really in the wake of the earthquake, a new organization has emerged that has named itself Tree of Life International for very good reason. And so we were more than willing to give up the name Tree of Life Doctor, Tree of Life Clinic. So you'll hear us refer to it as Lava Lane Doctor Support. But Tree of Life International is an outside organization that was started by a number of folks within our church community, Dan Ziegler, Lee Edsel, Walter Sawatsky, and a number of folks who also would be on their board but not be a part of the Southern Mennonite Church community. It's a separate entity. It's got its own 501c3 tax exemption, it has its own board, it has its own bank account. It is similar to Water for Life in the sense that it's structured separately, but it's similar to Water for Life also in that it's an organization and it's a ministry that we want to bless at Southern Mennonite Church and be supportive of. And their focus is really, this whole, you've heard the term, teach a man to fish or feed a man or teach a man to fish. Their concept is to teach people how to fish and help to try to figure out ways and help the people of the Lava Lane community to work through ways to provide for themselves economically through coffee plantings, feed milling, water bottling, as opposed to specific relief as it would relate to food, shelter, those types of things. So there's certainly a need there. There's another organization that some of us may be familiar with if you've been to the Lava Lane community called Haiti Relief and Mission. They continue to be on the ground in Lava Lane, and their focus would be more towards meeting the physical needs of the individuals within that community, whereas Tree of Life International would be working towards helping the folks of that community to economically figure out how to support themselves in the community in which they live. So that's a little bit about Tree of Life International. I'm sure you'll be hearing more. That group is getting up and running, and it's exciting to see what God's doing there. Haiti Relief is the name of is the term that we've used to describe the group that would have emerged following the earthquake. This is the group that thankful for the leadership of Janine Cardona, Jim Frankenfield, Lori Castle, Kim Weeder, and many, many others. And that group has really sensed what God is doing, what God is calling them to do in Haiti and providing relief and following the earthquake. That may be water, that may be buckets, it's shelter, it's food, it's toothbrushes, you name it. They've been involved on a number of different levels and continue to be. And there's a fundraiser next Wednesday, to put in a shameless plug. You probably have seen it in your mailboxes. So we want to continue to support that organization, which would be considered a ministry of Southern Mennonite Church. Monies payable to Southern Mennonite Church would be handled by Southern Mennonite Church, would be a part of our audit. Glenn Bauman has graciously given his time to make sure that the accounting of that organization, which has seen a substantial flow of dollars, is handled properly and monies are allocated to the purpose in which they were given towards. So I want to thank everyone that's been a part of what God's doing in Haiti and the continued support of the congregation. And be glad to answer any questions that you might have during the question and answer time. And again, I'm going to be looking to try to get out a letter to the congregation just describing those ministries, because things have changed from what we would have communicated back in January to where we are today. I just want to make sure that nobody gets left behind in terms of what's happening there. The final piece that I just wanted to talk about was a process that I would refer to as a mediation process that we've been working through with the pastoral team here at Southern Mennonite Church. And I would have stepped into the role that I'm serving in, which we've titled as senior manager back in, right around Thanksgiving in 2009. And I would have had previous experience working with teams and trying to bring teams together. And really for the first 6 months that I had the opportunity to serve on the staff here, I really felt like there was just a struggle to kind of bring everyone together. And when you come into a situation where you're really not prepared, you fall back to things that have worked in your past. And when you try every trick that you have ever known, you find yourself surrendering yourself to God. I think is typically how it works. And I think that was certainly my experience. And really the team, as I've come to discover, there's several attributes that I really think are important to make mention of. One is that the challenges that I think we've faced is really an inability over the years to be able to fully sort through and work out disagreements that may have happened that go back multiple years, 6, 7, 8, you name it. Certainly some of the things that were talked about and implemented during the staff restructuring that was put in place last fall were the more recent, were some of the more recent issues were created. But we really, as a team, as we entered this period of mediation, it was something that we decided was necessary as a group. We decided on the person that we want to bring in, and that was a sense amongst the group that we really wanted to, not just look at what's happened in the last 6, 9 months, but to look at it on a longer-term perspective. But a couple of the attributes of the team that I discovered very quickly in that process was a desire to be reconciled. This is a group of people that wanted to come together. They wanted to see God bring the group together as a team. And I think so often we have situations in our lives where we know we should be reconciled, but yet there's something that stands in the way of that. So this was a group of people that desired to be reconciled. There was also a tremendous sense of respect that I've sensed amongst everybody on the team. It's one thing to have a disagreement with somebody. It's another thing, though, to lose respect. And I really feel like there was a strong level of respect there. And there was also an intense commitment to the mission and vision of Saturday Mennonite Church and what God's doing here, and want to be a part of that. And also, I think, to me, the most amazing desire as leaders to want to model reconciliation to the church community. The reality is, as a church community that serves together, that works together, that prays and discerns what God is doing, we're not going to agree on everything all the time. And so wanting to model, what does it look like to not be in agreement? What does it look like to have friction, but be able to work through that in a Christ-like way, in a spirit-filled manner? And so with the backdrop of all that, we brought in an outside facilitator her name is Lorraine Stutz, and she would spend 3 sessions with the team, talking with individuals, talking with us as a group, and just getting us to be in dialogue and conversation. And our last session would have been actually last week. I'm losing track of my time. Last week, and that was our 3rd session. And at this point in time, it continues to be a work in process. I think anytime there's mediation that needs to take place, to say something is done is probably the start of history repeating itself. But at the same point in time, I can only speak for myself, but really feel like God has moved in that time. Really feel like I feel a different sense as we work together as a team. Conversations that we would have had 3 months ago about reconciliation and how do we come together have turned to what is God doing here at Saturday Night Church? How do we be prayerful? How do we listen? How do we sense and respond to what God is doing? How do we work together as a team to live that out? What does it look like to be in covenant to one another in a team environment and live out the call that God has placed on our lives individually and as the church as a whole? So again, I don't want to speak for the group as a whole. I can certainly speak for myself and what I've observed. Pastoral team meetings for me had become something that I needed to do, and they've become something that I get to do now. And so I really appreciate the work. And it's hard work to be reconciled. Don't let anyone fool you. But I appreciate the work that's been done by the team, being willing to not give up on each other, being willing to ask and accept forgiveness, and being willing to listen to each other with an open mind and a willingness to be reconciled. And I also thank you to the congregation for your circle of prayer and support, and ask that you continue to hold us up in your prayers as we go forward as a group. That's all I have.